Okay. Everything should be good now. How is it? Hello? Oh, wow. Okay. That is a pretty sizable delay, but it doesn't matter. Oh. Twitch. There we go. Okay. Do I want to tweet this out that I'm doing this? I might as well. No. No. Why did I click that? Man, I'm really glad that my screen isn't on stream right now. Okay, so my plan today is a video was released yesterday by a guy. Basically, it's just going over the entire development history of Legends ZA, which is massive that exists already. So I'm gonna watch that, and then after that, I guess I'm either gonna do Danganronpa with friend A, I'm gonna do Link's Awakening, or I'm just gonna end stream, depending on how I'm feeling, because this is an hour, roughly an hour long video. So that plus the 4 or 5 hours that Danganronpa usually takes. Don't know if I'll be up to that. But anyway, what's this? Nothing of note. Okay. So here we are. All right, so before I start this, I just want to mention who made this video. It's this guy, Turtle Bro on YouTube. And I don't exactly have permission to react to this, because I'm fairly certain if I asked, I would not get a response. But I still feel weird doing it. So actually, really quick, I gotta go do something. Okay. So, as I was saying, I feel weird doing this without permission, but I kind of have to, because I know I won't get any response if I ask, because I'm not big enough for that. But I still want to make sure I credit the right people. So this guy made this video. He makes a ton of these. He does all these deep dives into like the development history of Pokemon games. And they're all really good. I really like them. And this one came out yesterday, and I really wanted to just maybe watch it on stream. So with that,
welcome back. Today I will be walking.
Okay, we should be good to just start now.
Welcome back. Today I will be walking
Hello.
you through every single build of Pokemon.
Taka in chat. Hello. Hello. I'm watching this video right now. So there might be Danganronpa later today. If you want to watch, if you're expecting Danganronpa, that might happen later. But right now I'm watching this.
Of Tyrannic 2. Game Freak conveniently documented every month.
You made progress on
Legends
game 2? Congratulations.
Almost like a monthly magazine issue. There's roughly 60 to 70 videos and around 250 plus images from across development. So I've gone ahead and compiled it for you, and I'll be guiding you through this timeline. I want to clarify that while I did enjoy Legends,
you're not the trial. Which
it is
trial?
my intention to remain unbiased in this video. I will tackle issues, and that doesn't mean I will be negative, but rather I will tackle
Chapter
certain
5.
topics
I don't remember
with
which one that
genuine
was.
constructive criticism coming from a fan. Anyways, with that being said, sit back and enjoy this very special look at the complete development timeline for Legends ZA.
Is that the last trial? I don't remember which one that is. Oh, okay, it is Nagito.
So development on Legends ZA.
Okay, it is
appears
Nagito
to
then.
have
I didn't
begun
want to say
sometime
anything.
in late 2021 to early
Whoa, 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 whoa,
2022.
whoa, 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 whoa. Are those windows? Are those fully 3D modeled windows? What happened there? You got spoilers, so you know the murderer. That's unfortunate for you. What the hell happened here? They did model the windows.
Wrapped up. As we know, Game Freak usually juggles 2 to 3 projects at once, and during this time, they were likely just figuring out the scope of Lumio City, stuff like how big it should be, how dense, and how to take this location and adapt it into a full game. Fast forward a few months, and we get our first in-engine.
Okay. So I'm guessing you. Oh, they have the fuck. Okay. So I'm guessing you don't know anything about Pokemon Legends ZA. So I'm gonna explain this. In Pokemon Legends ZA, you see people playing it, but have you heard the discourse surrounding it? Because the biggest point of contention is these windows. Actually, let me see if I can find it. Windows. Where's a good picture? It's really hard to see. But basically, all the windows on these buildings are just flat textures. They're not actually modeled into the game. Like they're literally just printed onto the wall. Which is weird because Pokemon is like super a super profitable franchise. They have tons of money. There's no reason they should be cutting these corners. And they're not even good textures. They're like super pixelated. So there's absolutely no reason the game should look like this. And yet, and like even the balconies, like these little grates, can I get like zoomed in? See the little grates on the windows here, the little balconies. Those are also just flat textures on the wall. They're not actually there. Which again, there's no reason a Pokemon game should look like that. But watching this, that's a 3D model. That right there, that's a 3D model of a window. That's a 3D model of a balcony. What the hell happened? They did do it, and they took them out.
Look dated May 13, 2022. Immediately you may notice that the buildings have actual 3D texture detail.
Okay, well, cool. He was about to get to that.
At a glance, this almost looks like a stealth mission. It's actually just a viewing prompt for an NPC, and while there's nothing like this in the final game, it instantly reminds me.
Is the video about this? The video is the entire development history of the game. It's every internal document, every early build of the game from start to finish.
Games. This is just my observation, but considering Legend ZA was focused on building out a small but dense city, I wouldn't be surprised if Game Freak had extensively studied the Yakuza games in the lead up to ZA dev. The image below shows us how viewing Pokemon looked, along with the earliest look at Prism Tower, and a flock of Talonflame flying around. Notably, the UI has a very futuristic style to it. We have another one of these mysterious tailing screenshots, with seemingly an object, which is interesting, and a shot of 2D Bunnelby. According to the notes, the team was already experimenting with new Pokeball mechanics, specifically a tossing throw and a long-range throw. Finally, we get our last batch of shots for the day.
I think that would have been unnecessary.
The Talonflame flock again. One of the developers mentioned that throwing a ball would actually spawn a Talonflame, and commented about how oddly fun the mechanics were. On May 17,
I imagine that would have been like just a test for throwing the ball to send out your Pokemon. But why? I guess maybe they were seeing how many Pokemon they could have in an area before the game starts
finally been implemented into the game.
Chugging.
The next day featured an image of what appears to be an overpass in Lumio City, and unlike previous screenshots, this one shows missing building textures. Judging from a sequence of images,
but also windows,
seems to be the first day they experimented with rooftop traversal, which becomes increasingly important in later builds. It had been noted that Talonflame's long-awaited tornado jump had been implemented too, explaining that when the protagonist would touch the tornado, a high jump would activate. You will see video examples of this later on. The ZA Royale was mentioned here too, going by the name Mega Royale. I'm sure this came up in the proposal documents prior to this.
That sounds like a way better name.
The first piece of NPC dialogue was implemented. The developer mentioned that the RPG suddenly felt alive, simply because an NPC could now speak. In the dialogue, the clearly Serena placeholder model, labeled as Aunt, simply delivered basic controller instructions to the player.
Hold on, I want to see if I can read that. Hold on, I want to see if I can read that.
Aunt, simply...
Oi-san. Yeah, that's what that says. That is what that says.
Controller instructions to the player. Talonflame's tornado hitbox was made.
No, not Oi-san, One-san. What am I talking about? One-san, that's what that says.
Basic.
I guess Ne and Wa look similar. One-san is what that says.
Controller instructions to the player.
God, I'm.
Talonflame's tornado hitbox was made bigger too, which according to the dev's notes, suggests Talonflame was happy with this change. The following day, Abra joined the build.
Talonflame loves his massive ball.
Making this video, that Abra's Japanese name is literally just Casey. Like it's not using a Japanese word, it's literally just Casey. Bunnelby was also added to the park area, and the notes encourage comparing it to the May 13 screenshot. So here you go.
Okay, that's
developer also
decent.
Screamed of joy.
Hold on. How? Oh, okay, that's like a week. That's literally like a week of development time then.
Developer also screamed of joy because of how fast the implementation pace was, and the documentation becoming a daily routine. A few days later, Vivian was introduced, specifically the icy snow pattern.
Sans in YouTube chat, hello.
Obtaining Vivian forms hadn't been finalized yet. I'm not exactly sure how you get them in the final game. Fletchling also received its full 3D
Wait,
body.
right,
and
hold
the
on. I completely forgot Vivian has other forms. What? How does Vivian work again? Massive tangent. I completely forget how Vivian works. 20 known Vivian patterns, one of which is event exclusive. That's stupid. But it also has like different colors. Oh. I thought it was like 4. I didn't know it was this many. I thought it was like a spupa kind of thing where the spots are just on different places. I didn't know Vivian had this many patterns. I know this one, and I think I have this one. I want this one. How do I get that? 20 separate forms. The pattern of Vivian's wings is affected by the climate and topography of the environment it lives in and is born in. Okay. Yeah, this is like the standard form. How do you get the different ones then? Meadow pattern, meadow pattern, meadow pattern, marine pattern. Can you only trade all other patterns? So you, okay. It's literally you just have to trade it in from X and Y, which you can't do yet. Because Pokemon Home support isn't in. But my God, once Pokemon Home support is added for Legends ZA, I am immediately uploading my Pokemon Y team into Legends ZA. I need Boruto the Greninja to be on my team. What is this? Polar pattern. That's so cool. I did not know Vivian had this many forms. That's awesome. Okay, I got sidetracked again.
remarks how happily they chirped, again treating the Pokemon as if they were living creatures in the workspace. The so-called viewing mode received refinements too, though outside of visual polish, nothing
That's
major
adorable,
seems to
by
have
the way.
changed here. And the next day was all about Go-Goat. Go-Goat has become so magnificent. No, three-dimensional. In XY, you could ride a Go-Goat in Lumio City, so it's only natural that humans would want to ride one in ZA as well. Unfortunately, this turned out to be one of the biggest 48s we've ever seen in Pokemon development history. Because as you may already know, you couldn't ride any Pokemon. It's honestly tragic. Because even internally they were aware that players would be anticipating its return. Clearly the animations hadn't been rigged yet, but we'll see more of this later. There's
Yeah,
also another instance of Game
I want to
Freak
know what happened
commenting
with
in
that.
character, joking that people were too busy admiring Skiddo's cuteness to notice changes in lighting. Mind the slight mistranslation, but it appears they started adding Pokemon to rooftops here, and that it seemed
Houndoom.
like a new concept. The developer noted that just seeing Alakazam on a rooftop somehow felt like a side quest. You were also able to send out Casey from your party. Developer was looking forward to the abilities Casey would be able to use. The following day, the dev commented on the city's sunlight. The grass was described as having grown lush, again staying in character. I wonder if this style of documentation has been done for the other 3D Pokemon games.
That is interesting because I've watched this guy's other videos, and I've never seen him talk about, and it seems like he's never seen it. It seems like he's never seen it either. But this is not normal documentation for a Pokemon game development, or at least it's never been released. If they do this, so, but it seems like the devs are having fun with it.
Been added to the game, as well as the first enterable interior. According to the developer, talks had gone on about how it'd be great if there were lots of interiors to discover in the game. Unfortunately,
There aren't. They're none
outside the main story. So it's sad to see that this was the original plan. With the game set entirely within a city, it just feels like a huge missed opportunity to get as ambitious as possible. At the end of the day, I get why they scaled back. You're gonna spend most of the time catching Pokemon outside anyway, so I get it, but it's still a shame they had to hold back. Here's a solid look at the buildings at the time.
There's
It's
no
around now
reason
that we are
to have had to do
introduced
that.
one of the game's gimmicks. By throwing your Pokemon towards a distant spot, you could manually aim and press A to activate its special ability, after which you'd instantly teleport to your Pokemon's side. This is clearly the prototype that eventually became the Rotom Glide. The notes imply that this teleportation could have been used almost anywhere, including in online multiplayer. Then on May 26th,
What? Hold
Strath
on.
Blue-
That would have been in the Royale mode? Or I guess the online multiplayer would have been different. Maybe. But also, this sounds way cooler than what we got. All of this sounds so much better than what we ended up getting.
was added. A new ball impact display was implemented too, noted that in this game, the point of impact would be much more important than in Legends Arceus. Ironically, I found that the ball throwing in the final game is actually snappier and simpler than in Arceus, meaning this idea was scaled back. Magikarp was added too. Oh, and a shiny Magikarp. Yup, that was the first shiny to be added to the game. History.
Makes
Gyarados
sense.
followed, accompanied by a strange drawbridge model pointing directly into the water for unknown reasons. Furfrou also joined the build, and with it came a Pokédex scanning feature, where Pokemon would react in viewing mode. Pressing A would scan the task data, clearly referencing the scanning gimmick from the anime. It honestly feels like a feature that Game Freak has been wanting to implement since Gen 4, so it's interesting that even here, when the chance was right in front of them, it's still
I don't see a reason why they should have had to
Another note
remove that.
mentions that the dev purchased a tornado effect from the asset store, surprising even Talonflame. They emphasized that visual persuasion was important. With a presentation meeting scheduled for the 30th, the team was preparing to compile everything so far into a milestone ROM, which is common practice for every single Pokemon game. These meetings are usually when new ideas are pitched, and pivots would be imposed. Regardless, on May 27, you are now able to talk to NPCs from a distance. The devs suggest that this would be useful for calling out to characters standing on the second floor, and that some NPCs
Again,
might even
never
deliver
that
unique
didn't
dialogue,
happen.
depending on how far away you were. We brought up the topic of textured buildings earlier, and these next few screenshots especially give a crystal clear look at how detailed the buildings once were. And I say that as someone who loves Legends EA and wasn't personally bothered by the flat textures. I'm sure Nintendo themselves isn't proud of publishing a game that looks like this.
Are we serious right now? That looked beautiful, and that was the first build. They could have released this. That was... Are we serious right now? No, now it's pissing me off.
Flat textures.
I need to know what happened to make them start scaling back. Because I don't see any reason that any of these features couldn't have been in the final game. Like, I can definitely see some of them being like, okay, maybe we don't actually just want to. There's absolutely no reason that they should have had the buildings modeled. So this was never in the release. So, see this wall? See how it's completely flat and all the windows are just flat textures? You see that? This is how it looked in the first build of the game that was never released. This was the earliest beta. There's absolutely no reason that I can think of that a company as wealthy as Pokemon should have had to scale that back. I genuinely cannot think of a single reason that this got turned into this. I need to see what happened. I need to find out what the hell
Valve
happened
isn't
here.
proud of publishing a game that looks like this either, especially when the Switch has games that look absolutely stunning, despite the hardware limits. Honestly, even the ninjas are probably mad about losing these 3D textured buildings. It seems that just a day after the Pokédex scanning feature was implemented, the UI was suddenly removed whenever you looked at a Pokémon, meaning you had to physically aim at them instead. Clearly they were experimenting with different scanning methods, but hadn't yet settled on anything.
Do you think they tried to lower the gigabytes of the game's download? It shouldn't be downloaded. It's on a game card. But that again, that should not be the thing that they go to for that. Their thing shouldn't be make the game look dog shit. It's optimize your code. You guys are the most profitable franchise in the world. There's zero reason that you couldn't. They had the buildings.
Pop-up labels had changed too. Heading into June, a few small HUD adjustments were implemented, but the first major update came on June 8. The topography of the park had been revamped, introducing more varied, uneven terrain. Here it is compared to how it looked earlier. By the 13th, you could now properly ride Go-Goat, with a player model fully rigged to the Pokemon. You could clearly move around, and even jump. It was noted that this would
And another
function as
thing,
a special
this is 2022. The Switch 2, nobody was developing games for that yet. Hello, Rose Queen. This was 2022. The Switch 2 wasn't out yet. I doubt dev kits for it were out yet. Maybe if they were, Pokemon Company would probably have one. But, like, they're developing this for the Switch at this point. So they get more power when the Switch 2 comes out. Presumably. I'm making assumptions here. But assuming they were making this with the Switch in mind, they then got more power to work with when the Switch 2 was announced. And dev kits were released. It boggles my mind. Because this looks beautiful. And it's absolutely possible. Because Breath of the Wild did it. And that was the first game to ever release on the Switch. Yeah, it wasn't perfect. It didn't look perfect. But, like, this game is quite a bit smaller. There's no reason that this game should look as bad as it does. It's still a very good game, but it's just... there's no reason.
ability, similar to the tornado jump. Go-Goat could even stand on the edge of cliffs, possibly hinting
Oh, that's
that
funny.
wild Pokemon was
That's
supposed
funny,
to help
actually.
you scale these uneven terrain. I really like this image here. Later on, this uneven terrain would be referred to as a mysterious mountain. You could also now talk to NPCs while riding a Pokemon, and the Y button was now mapped to dashing. On a practical level, this seemed like a complete feature, so it's surprising to see
I'm
that
doing
it was
good.
removed. Though clearly the feature was still a little broken. This NPC appears to be the one who gave you Go-Goat in this build. Here's a nice shot of Vivian that made the dev reminiscent of their childhood. There's also an interesting back-end detail here. Since the Switch doesn't use the same regional locking system as the 3DS, regional...
The Switch. The Switch. They're talking about the Switch. So, I mean, yeah, I guess they were always planning to release it on the Switch. I guess the question is, did they know they were developing for the Switch too at this point?
patterns couldn't be determined the same way as they did in X and Y. This news allegedly came as a shock even to Vivian. Shortly after, a bugged out version
Love
of
that they
Hyrule
keep
was added.
saying that.
Then we get a small narrative sequence. The dev notes that the player had gotten familiar with the people on the street, and suddenly, an identical trainer popped out. Before you knew it, the trainer ran away. This was their way of showing that online play was now being tested. At this point, you'd only be able to jump on each other's tornadoes. Color indicators were being considered too. By the 23rd, Pyro's model had finally been fixed. The next bit appears to be an unused mechanic involving Fennekin. It had this grey disc around it, and walking into that zone would turn it green. Then aiming would trigger a special viewing mode, where Fennekin followed right beside you, and that's how you would activate its ability.
More models. Florges! My goat, Florges. I had a Florges in my playthrough. I wanted to use one in X and Y when I played, like, last year, but I just never did. Or I did play it, but I never used a Florges. Hold on, what? Yeah, okay, Florges. Pat Rat. Balls on the head. I can't think of what that would. I cannot think of what that would be. This is okay. This is items like just on the ground. Go-Goat. But they have a Go-Goat model, so what the hell would that be? I mean, I'm assuming these are all the same model, just with different textures, and they're using that as placeholders for things.
Moving into early July, we have a few more images before reaching our first gameplay video. Petrat aiming was the main highlight of the
Maybe those, maybe those are like Pokemon NPCs. Maybe they didn't want to have to put in the entire model for the Pokemon and program them as an NPC, so they just had this box to represent an interactable thing. Oh my god, shut up about cheap viewers on streamboo.com.
Moving into early July, we have a few more images before reaching our first gameplay video. Petrat aiming was the main highlight of the July 1st build. Then on July 4th, it looks like they were testing the multiplayer win of the July
Can I read
1st
that?
build.
Can I read that?
Then
Can I read that? Kantan. I can't really read katakana yet. I can read a bit of it. Pretty sure that's adult. I don't know that character. And then I don't know those two. Or I probably should, but I forget. Mole. Blanking on that. Goo. Gaipai. Nanode. I'm probably not reading them like with the proper spacing or anything, but Nanode. Something. Remasen. God, I need to finish learning Japanese. Or at least being able to read, so I could not be reading like cut up phrases like that. Jeez.
For a mode allegedly called Easy Royale, which leads directly into our first video. To summarize, players would be matched one-on-one and throw Pokeballs at each other. When a ball hit a player, a balloon above their head would pop. If you were hit from behind, 2 balloons would pop. Lose 3 balloons, and you would lose the match. Contrary to the name, Easy Royale was described as not easy at all. At this point it was basically just ball mashing chaos, with the expectation that Pokemon themselves would eventually play a role in the mode. Again, the buildings just stand out and look absolutely incredible here. It's pretty clear that online multiplayer became a massive priority starting in early July, which is interesting, because Legends Arceus had essentially
and there's the stealth mode again
during its entire development. At this point the capacity was just 2 people, and the green balloons above players' heads were present throughout most of July. By the 5th, the streetlights had been stylized, and here's a closer look at the rest of the buildings from around this time.
Goddamn beautiful! That's outstanding! Are you kidding me? Compared to the final game... Oh, this actually makes me upset.
This image is pretty insane too. Go-Goat looking over this massive barren landscape. that somewhat resembles ruins. Clearly this part of a city hadn't been designed or textured yet, and none of the final game's wild areas look anything like this. But I think it's worth highlighting just how different Lumio City was early on. Like, we're seeing huge layout differences compared to the final game. Yet gameplay wise, the layout in the final product still came together pretty well. I mean, I don't remember Legends Arceus or Scarlet and Violet ever reshaping their world this drastically mid-development, so visuals aside, you have to give Game Freak credit for actually experimenting during the development of a Switch game. They used to change so much on the fly back in the day, especially if something wasn't working, so it's kind of nice to at least see some of that mindset return in the modern day. Oh, and Pangoro was added around this time.
My goat. I had a Pangoro in my
Our second
Pokemon
video
Y
comes
playthrough.
from July 14. It's actually more monumental than you may think, because this is our clearest look at what a wild zone looked like at this stage. The area seems to resemble a mini park on a raised platform. At least to me, it kind of feels like the hologram gates were a substitute for these platforms. The climb up is fairly steep, and besides the mountain at the top, it obviously lacks a lot of the design from the final wild zones. It's also clear that we are pretty much rooftop level here, further supporting that initial platform philosophy. I honestly can't decide whether this or the hollow gates were the better direction.
Well done, 17. 17 was technically the first. Okay, that actually that makes sense since it has such like it has the lower level and the higher level.
Several images from this date also show 6 Pokemon behind the trainer, a returning feature from Legend Arceus.
We could
that
have
was
had our team
surprisingly
following
removed
us.
in ZA. In the final game, the only way to really see your entire team is by using the benches, and even that isn't really a great option. July 15 is a bit strange. Starts off in viewing mode with a crystal clear view of Gogoat's backside. I can't tell if it's being controlled or has a mind of its own. But then it sort of becomes clear that Gogoat does have a mind of its own. At first I didn't get it, but then later in the video seems to indicate that it's just a wild Gogoat roaming around the city. July 19 was pretty legendary too, because we finally get to see Gogoat riding in video form, and it looks amazing. The animations are shockingly polished by this point as well, and finally we get to see Talonflame's tornado ability in action. It appears you trigger the ability to scale buildings and tall heights. Really smart idea. In the final game, the only way to scale buildings was to climb ladders. It suggests they originally planned for much more vertical exploration across buildings, especially of varying sizes. On the right side of the footage, we also get a better look at the uneven terrain from earlier, showing how tall these formations could get, though the graphics kind of remind me of Scarlet and Violet.
Yeah, but it's a beta build, which really just tells you more about Scarlet and Violet than this game. Yeah, this is the thing that upsets me, man. It's because I love this game. I've had such a great time with it, and I really like it. You do feel immersed in it when you're playing it. Like you feel like you're in a city. A relatively small city, but a city nonetheless. Like it feels alive. But like I can only imagine how much better it would have been if they'd had the details in that, if everything wasn't just so flat.
And July 20 is Nightmare Fuel. Gyarados spots the player and relentlessly chases them
God,
while
that's
Pokeballs
terrifying.
bounce off its body. Pokemon has never had a mechanic where the ball literally bounces off a Pokemon in real time, though I'm very glad they didn't implement it for real, because it probably would have been very annoying.
I can see why it might seem fun to have that, but I think it's hard to aim at a specific part of a Pokemon.
21st, and the background visuals here look genuinely impressive. The very next day we get another video. This one seems to demonstrate the early multiplayer sneaking mechanic. I think it's finally clicked. Maybe one of the concepts for this minigame was that it would have some sort of hide and seek element, and you'd have to throw Pokeballs at your targets in order to catch them. That actually sounds pretty fun. especially if the areas were restricted to smaller zones like the same size as the battle zones.
Yeah,
Then on
that
July
would have been really
28th,
cool.
we get our first look at the in-battle system, as written right here. It is really bare at this point, with absolutely no UI at all. July 29 introduces what seems to be yet another wild area, but this one is positioned below ground level instead of above it. A new Vivian pattern is shown as well. There's also a task menu on the side. Heading into August, sprinting was finally mapped to pushing down the left stick.
Well, I think pressing the stick is a bit too much for some enthusiasts. It's comfortable and easy to operate the camera because it doesn't require your thumb to use it. I think this level of control is acceptable for the Legend series. As someone whose frontal lobe is made up of the CPU of a Super Nintendo, Y dash and B jump seem like a natural fit. But maybe it's not the time to allocate the precious Y button to an action like dashing. And then they put it on B.
Crouching was added around this time too. I don't quite remember any alleys like this in the final game. I assume this is what the alleyway looked like, just a small open space. Also, it seems you could crouch while sneaking. I wonder if sneaking just evolved into crouch sneaking altogether. Texture quality appears to have improved as well. It might just be a better quality screenshot, but the buildings definitely look a lot better here. I assume this is in front of a station. The dev noted some philosophy, but a great thing about crouching was how it automatically created a sense of connection with a Pokemon. And here's a really good look at a mountain-like area. It seems to be located in a different place than where we previously saw. Wide Pikachu is now implemented into the game too.
Wide Pikachu!
This is not edited, it's just how the screenshot came. Here we can see Wide Pikachu using Electroweb. On the 5th, we see a strange running animation, possibly a test for strafe movement, though there's no UI indicating aiming mode. What's really interesting though, as you'll see in a second, all your Pokemon follow you around. The player has about 4 Pokemon around them, and it appears they all follow you at once. Very interesting. We also get another glimpse of a wild area. Again, this is beneath ground level. On August 8, the developer added English names of the developers above the players' heads, noting that seeing these in English instantly gave the game an MMO-like feel. I would imagine if Pokemon ever made an official MMO, we would possibly see nameplates above heads like this. This screenshot was described
That
as
would be
Blue
sick.
Team, since the multiplayer mode had now shifted into a team-based 4v4 format, which really shows in these next screenshots. As
Well,
it's
that's
clearly a dedicated
approaching what we
multiplayer
got
testing environment.
in the final game.
With crouching now implemented, players could hide in grass as well. Since Scarlet and Violet had a similar feature, it seems that this would become the standard for future games. I like the direct mention of a concrete jungle here. Since the
Whoa,
vision
wait. Did he just say it seems? It seems that Titan, which is Scarlet and Violet, has a similar feature. So it may become the standard. So did they not know what was going on in Scarlet and Violet? Because Scarlet and Violet was 2023 or 2022? When was Scarlet and Violet? It was 2022, but it was December. So Scarlet and Violet was still a few months away. So they had no idea what was happening with Scarlet and Violet.
for future games. I like the direct mention of a concrete jungle here, since the vision was a mix between a concrete and a jungle. The multiplayer UI seems to have stayed, and the emphasis on hiding mechanics further backs my hide and seek theory. Lumio's tower was finally updated too, which is a pretty big milestone. There's also a fantastic image showing a huge number of developers connected in a single multiplayer session, giving off a full MMO vibe. It's probably the closest we've ever come to seeing what an official Pokemon MMO would look like. It's noted that summer vacation would begin the following day, marking a week break for Game Freak. Development resumed
Well, that's good
on
at
August
least.
17 with a short video of a developer testing Talonflame's tornado jump and completely missing the platform. From here we get a series of videos throughout the rest of August, though it's not entirely clear what was being tested in some of them. One clip shows a trainer jumping off a roof, but instead of being saved by Rotom, the player simply lands with no fall damage. I'm guessing this is around the time water floating mechanics were being implemented. This was also the day Binacle was added to the game.
I love Binacle. I love all the Pokemon.
I'm not sure if
Except
this next scene is related to multiplayer or
that
the
one
battle
thing that I
zones,
forget the name
but
of, but I hate
appears
it.
that throwing your Pokeball at another player would initiate a battle, but there still wasn't any sign of a battle system in the game yet. But by the end of August, it seems that had finally begun. It also appears the documenter celebrated the end of August, since another developer was sensitive to heat. Moving into September, we're formally introduced to the Mega Royale concept as it existed at the time. Teams were split into two groups, playing up to 4v4. It's a bit difficult to piece together how this mode would have worked, but it definitely involved battles. These battles were described as not turn-based, but cooldown based, and no matter how many Pokemon you had, even if one fainted, your entire team would lose that round, which sounds pretty harsh.
Oh, wait. Okay, actually, hold on. I'm hungry. I need to go get a snack. I will be right back. Okay, I am back. Don't know if anyone's still here, but I got breadsticks. Anyway, I'll hope that doesn't come up on the stream. I'll hope that doesn't come up on the stream. Let me just see here actually. You know what? I'm gonna test that. I'm gonna mute the audio of the okay. Okay, so I know that that's muted. Uh no way. You can barely hear it. Perfect. That's perfect. Um all right. Then let's get back to it.
Painted Pokemon also wouldn't be able to participate in the rest of the battles. Losing 3 Pokemon battles would remove you from the game entirely, and the first team to knock out 2 opposing players would win. It feels like they were trying to integrate classic Pokemon into a team-based format, kind of like Splatoon.
I
It's a
was
bit
gonna say
confusing.
this is reminding me a lot of
Overall, though, I
Splatoon,
think the final game
but
of
it's also
CA
partially
Royale was a
because
much better
I
execution of the
literally just
idea.
got Splatoon 3.
September 6th then brought the fully textured Lumio station into the game, which I believe is the first fully completed model for Legends EA. Game Freak also shared a few short comments about the design philosophy, especially noting how the station wasn't depicted in X and Y. The station platform itself was also under construction, but already had a very solid foundation. A defeat animation for battles was implemented around this time as well. An interaction pop-up was added on the 9th, but what really stands out in these screenshots is just how good the game already looked. I like how the camera is especially close to the player, very unique for Pokemon, kind of reminiscent of Legends Arceus. Though this
Literally,
combo
if
of
they
later
added
comes literally
shaders.
haunt the game. On the 12th, we finally learned what Fennekin's overworld ability was, through a sniff prompt. In the final game, there are these respawning item boards all over the map, so I would assume originally it seems that you would have to sniff them out. It seems that Fennekin would be able to sniff out other players too, which massively reinforces the hide and seek theory. Fennekin could sense opponents and trap.
That makes sense because the game is very liberal with overworld items. I say that as if there's anything other than the overworld. The game is very liberal with items hidden around, not even hidden. Like there's the little sparkling items just on the road, but then there's also the Pokeball items. Like they're everywhere. They are not hidden, and there's tons of them. So I think it makes sense that maybe there was a more treasure hunting aspect to them before.
Within a certain range. It doesn't even feel like a theory anymore. The multiplayer mode definitely had a hide and seek component built into its design. On September 16, we got our first fully modeled interior, the Hotel Z lobby, and the lighting looks absolutely stunning. Even in the final game, the interiors were exceptionally well done, with no compromises to the quality. The only difference I could really note between here and the final game seems to be the lighting, which feels more like a stylistic shift than a downgrade. A few days later, many more Pokemon were added to the game. Blastoise's shading in particular looked incredibly clean. Up until now, Talonflame had been the strongest Pokemon in the prototype, followed by Gogoat. But with these new additions, the balance was starting to shift. This shot of Gyarados vs Pangoro gives us a clearer look at the battle system as it existed at the time. Not that far off from the final game. Starting with October, the next 6 months would be dedicated to building a
Beginning of this month. Why is it already October? That's so fair. This month's Ikaku, which is Legends ZA. Sorry. which began in May, is slowly approaching its half anniversary. Looking back at the past pages, I already feel nostalgic. That's so real. Well then, the next 6 months will be the beta prototyping period. Here are our rough big goals. Make Mega Royale a super fun game. Include a mock-up of early stages of the game, including gameplay related to the progression cycle, such as scan and rank. Scan, I'm guessing, was going to be the Mabel missions. Identify the necessary specifications and complete the full specifications list version 1.0. Complete preparations for the transition to the Pokemon engine. Wow, seriously, that's super hard. The number of planners and programmers will increase, but we will still be under pressure, so let's keep our focus and push forward.
Solid beta prototype. There were several specific goals outlined for this period, and it seems Game Freak was still figuring out
Who's writing
exactly
these?
what Mega Royale was supposed to be. Early October began with a modeling of a train platform. I wasn't particularly blown away by the graphics here in the final game, but it looked fine, and for the most part it's pretty much the same here. One of the biggest revelations, in my opinion, comes from this next screenshot. It clearly shows that Lumio City's exterior was originally meant to be modeled. In the final game, there's absolutely no detail outside the city's boundaries, but there's so much more going on here. In fact, it
You can
almost
see
resembles
outside
a
of the
proper route
city?
branching off from the station. They even noted that this was on the south side, implying that you'd be able to see Santaloon City in the distance. Binacle was shown with a stealth rock prompt. I'm not entirely sure how this overworld ability would work. If any of you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them. The 13th brought even more battle screenshots, and for the first time, the Mega Gouge officially appeared in gameplay.
I'm realizing, I haven't mentioned this yet, but something I've always wondered about this game. Were there any plans for North Kalos? Or is it North Kalos, right? It's North Kalos. Or is it's South Kalos? What the? Yeah, South Kalos. I'm wondering if they ever had plans to, because they had plans for South Kalos in Pokemon Z, which never ended up coming out. So I'm wondering if there was ever plans for it to be in this as well. Because it's so disappointing that South Kalos isn't a thing.
Mega Evolution itself wasn't implemented yet, leading to this Blastoise believing it was a Mega Blastoise. On September 19, we're shown a glimpse of a completely new area in Lumio City. The buildings over here clearly weren't designed yet, meaning they weren't using any of the existing models from earlier. This appears to be the Hotel Z alley, giving us our earliest look at the exterior of Hotel Z. Overall, the layout here is identical to the final game. Shortly after, these power beams were added. At first glance, they look like the rogue Mega Mechanic, but they're actually Mega Power spots. These were intended as locations where you could gather Mega Power and charge your ring to fill your Mega Gouge. The idea makes sense in theory, but it's pretty obvious why it was cut. The Mega Crystal idea was just way faster and way more intuitive. By the end of the month, following Pokemon had been refined, and the player would now walk with a single partner Pokemon. According to the notes, you were already able to Mega Evolve them as well. The remaining notes for the month included design philosophies for several early Mega Evolution, revealing that even at this stage, the rules for Mega Royale still hadn't been fully finalized. By November 1st, a small store in front of a station had been modeled. Based on the familiar layout, I'd make a bold guess and say this was modeled after the classic Pokemon. In the final game, the Pokemon was integrated directly into the Pokemon Center, while these smaller booths were repurposed into drink stands.
I don't think I've ever used one of those.
November 2nd then brought along this incredible screenshot of a refined battle UI. Very fresh. If a final game was turn-based, I would hope the aesthetic would look a lot like this. What's interesting is that the drop-down suggests that you could select moves directly from the screen rather than pressing a button, yet the moves themselves still had a cooldown. There's absolutely no sign of real-time movement either, meaning the system was still very much a twist on classic turn-based combat. Also, Mega Blastoise was finally implemented, likely the first Mega Evolution model added to the game. By the 9th, several updates had been made to Mega Royale. In this screenshot, a trainer is shown sneaking up on an opponent. This is also our first video demonstration of this new turn-based system. And the Mega Power spots in action. The animations had been polished as well. Considering how unplanned Mega Royale originally was, it's crazy to think that these early concepts eventually evolved into the battle zone we know today.
Oh, that's interesting. When a battle starts, you get a few seconds to pick which Pokemon you want to use. I didn't notice that. That's something I've literally always thought about being in a Pokemon game. It's like when you start a battle, you get to choose the Pokemon you want to lead with.
At the time. Apparently, the protagonist and rival were meant to gaze at the moon here. A couple similar scenes like this played out in the final game. It also seems the surrounding area was originally planned to be a bit bigger. Here we see the protagonist walking on a rooftop before looking up and spotting a floating Blaziken. Also a trio of NPCs,
Wait.
described as girl talk in...
Was Blaziken in the base game? I have a Blaziken in the DLC. I guess they were always in the game, but the DLC makes them accessible? I have no idea.
Devastation. Game Freak wanted to place lots of NPCs in Legends EA to make it feel lively and full of people, and I'd say they absolutely succeeded at that. The NPC work was definitely one of the strongest aspects of the game. Next is some incredible footage from the November 17 build, heavily focusing on the turn-based system. Several adjustments had been made, pushing it closer to traditional Pokemon battles, though with an increased emphasis on speed. November 18 brought this image framing the scale of the environment, which was compared to the simplicity of Legends Arceus. Seeing both side by side, you can really understand why Pokemon initially marketed this as their most ambitious project yet back when it was announced. Towards the end of the month, the Quasartico building finally appeared in Lumio City. While the logo is different from the final version, the building itself is practically identical.
I think the logo
Interestingly,
change was
notes
good.
described Quasar as a foreign corporation, and that this was the Lumio City branch, built within the last 5 years. Hydro Cannon was also added as an overworld ability. It could push opponents away and disrupt enemy trainers. Pretty cool feature.
I was gonna
imagine
say
this would
Mario
especially be
Sunshine.
fun in multiplayer. Overall, it shows that the gameplay loop could have been drastically different if overworld abilities carried into battle. Though it seems the developer had some pretty insane ideas with it. Remember people, with great power comes great responsibility. December opened with an upgraded texture to Hotel Z. Generally, this whole area appears to have introduced a slight 3D texture upgrade. The door now actually linked to the Hotel Z interior. I didn't think the graphics could look any better than in the final game, but here they somehow do. The lighting work is extremely impressive, almost giving off a ray tracing illusion. If you saw this screenshot on its own, it'd be hard to believe that it was from a Pokemon game. I'm sorry Pokemon, but this is genuinely gorgeous.
And it sucks that they took it out.
Mega Royale
Like, come
finally
on.
introduced multiplayer battles around this time as well, supporting up to 4v4, though the details would be figured out later. The interior of Quasartico had been modelled as well, though the character lighting was completely broken. It still wasn't decided whether more floors beyond the ground level would be built out. By December 6, Alakazam received a Mega Special ability, tailored for Mega Royale.
What is that lighting? Why does that look great? Am I insane?
December 6, Alakazam received a Mega Special ability, tailored for Mega Royale. It seems the earlier overworld-oriented abilities had now evolved into Mega exclusive abilities designed for use in battles. The next day introduced another Mega Special ability. I like that these abilities were useful for combat, but I do
A lot of stuff looked more realistic than in that version. What the hell? Like, look at the lights. And the 3D building textures. I mean, obviously it looks like a beta, because it is a beta. But these lighting effects are better than what's in the final game.
another Mega Special ability. I like that these abilities were useful for combat, but I do miss the more creative, exploration-based abilities they were originally experimenting with. The day after, battle transitions were polished, and the UI was slightly updated. Still absolutely no sign of real-time combat. On the 12th, Blaziken's model was finally fixed, and it received a Rock Wall Mega ability.
Oh? Interesting. What the hell is that in chat? What is that?
December 13th marked the addition of the earliest story events. Here you're looking at the moment the player first walks into Lumiose City. Very simple, but it did the job.
Insanity, that is?
A day later,
Okay.
the developer
Okay, buddy.
took their Go-Goat-chan on a walk, and it started behaving like this. Yes, this was just a bug, but I do like how the wild Vivian follow you around. Venusaur had been added to the game too, with a mega ability based on Energy Ball. This was an exploding pollen bomb that would probably hit multiple opponents at once. Mega Pyro received Flame Charge.
You drank
as its
seawater.
mega
Don't do
ability.
that. That
You
could,
can
like,
kind
kill
of
you, I
see
think.
how these abilities eventually just merged back into standard gameplay. Adaman from Legends Arceus was added as a placeholder for the rival. Alongside him were the starters of Legends EA. In fact,
That's
the
fun.
first time they appeared in Engine. Of course, the final models look much better. By December 20th, most of the introduction sequence had been implemented. It featured a small montage around Lumiose City before the player was dropped onto the train tracks. Don't worry, this was just a temporary stand-in for the train scene, before teleporting to the platform. One immersion detail I really liked: you could actually see Lumiose City from a platform. In the final game, the reveal is a flashy effect, which looks cool, but it removes that subtle early peak of a city.
No, I like
Immediately
this better.
afterwards, the player would get jump
the
scared by a full 3D Hilda model, likely
Hilda?
used as a placeholder for Jet. Yes, this is the same Hilda model from the X and Y development era. Even in development, they were bringing back nostalgia. Afterwards,
I was gonna say, where the hell did that Hilda model come from?
have some strange interactions with some Pokemon before chasing a Froakie towards Vert Plaza. where the
Froakie!
starter
My goat
cutscene
Froakie. I love
sequence
Froakie.
began. Approaching Hotel Z, you'd run into another rival, represented by Shauna's X and Y model. This is where you'd be introduced to Zygarde and the general story setup, and where the first battle occurred.
Wait.
Tiano's model was the general
Hold
by
on.
Shauna. Approaching Hotel Z, you'd run into another rival, represented by Shauna's X
Okay.
and Y model. This is where you'd be introduced to Zygarde.
I was gonna say, I thought he said that was Emma, but that'd be weird because Emma was in X and Y and she has a model and there's no reason to have used someone else's model.
And the general story setup, and where the first battle occurred. Tiano's model was also found inside Hotel Z, being used as a placeholder for none other than AZ, a very surprising choice.
But AZ was
Also,
in X and
why
Y!
Pikachu still existed. By December 21st, work on the map model had begun, which meant they began mapping out the rest of the city. The starting area in particular looked the best it had so far. Most of the NPCs on the streets were replaced with blue team variants of a player character, and the developers compared the trees in this area to something from Super Mario 64.
They
On
do
the
kind of look like
27th,
Mario
a
64
proper
trees.
menu UI was added. While it was clean, the final game's version is just far easier to read. It would undergo some tweaks later on, but at this point it was just hard to read. The notes seem to suggest that the original plan included a sequence where the player would start in their actual home, and commute into Lumio City by train at the start of the game. And that was it for 2022 development for Legends EA. Moving into the new year, early January
Wide
confirmed
Pikachu?
that Wide Pikachu was somehow still in the game. It's a bit hard to tell what's going on here.
See what won't
but
kill
it
you,
seems
it
like
just
the
make you
player is
sick.
just bonding
That
with
doesn't
Wild
change
Pokemon.
anything.
January
don't
6th
drink it.
then brought some major images. The second one in particular showcased an incredibly unique Lumio City skyline. Buildings of all shapes and sizes packed tightly together, with even taller silhouettes layered behind them. From this angle it looked like the city grew in height the further out you went. Overall, early
That would have been
January was
awesome.
spent modeling out the rest of Lumio City. After a few more UI updates, we reach January 17. Get a good final look at these buildings, because our next update from January 26 would reveal that these building textures had suddenly gone 2D. It may or may not be a coincidence that this was the first month where we didn't get a written monthly issue, only these visual changes through screenshots. It's not even a hot take. This is one of, if not the saddest day in the entire development time.
Oh my god, come on, man.
All that rich building detail was completely stripped to this flat wallpaper texture. At least the station texture remained. The team made a valiant attempt to compensate and make up for it. I mean, the Pokemon Center does look really nice, but alas, it was a small return for a massive downgrade. This must have been a devastating internal setback. Even early February notes suggest
there are now only 2 months left in the beta testing period. We've made major changes to the specifications since last month. Your birthday is January 26th? Well, I hate to break it to you, but your birthday ruined this game. And I believe this has increased the burden on everyone. Thank you to everyone who has been involved in the design and implementation. We plan to show the progress of the ROM to outside parties again within the month. We will try to incorporate the necessary implementation within this month as well, as much as possible, and finish the ROM so that people can feel confident that this looks like it will work.
The developers themselves were unhappy with the January changes, and judging by the rest of the timeline, there were no intentions to reintroduce the fully modeled buildings. Regardless, the rest of Lumio City was now mostly textured. February 6 showed a strong visual foundation overall, including a clip of a wild Venusaur attacking the player. Interestingly, the mechanic where you could knock out a Pokemon first and then catch it was already present, something that did end up making it into the final game. And
this looks so unbelievably worse.
While the buildings lost their detail, in turn the foliage of Lumio City looked impressive. It kind of seems like the realism intended for the buildings was transferred into the natural environment instead, when ideally it probably should have been the opposite. I personally would have preferred cartoonish wildlife, similar to Legends Arceus, and realistic architecture, though at the end of the day, wild textures in ZA are still the best they've ever looked in Pokemon, by a realistic standard at least. Then February 8's Mega Royale footage introduced an entirely new direction for the mode. It seems abilities were now scrapped, and Mega Royale shifted towards a 4v4 Splatoon style FPS format. Really strange stuff. I can kind of see the appeal, but it probably would have worked better if you directly controlled the Pokemon rather than your trainer sprinting alongside it. It's not a terrible concept, but it's a huge step away from everything they were building towards. And I like that the final ZA Royale pulled it back and made it simpler again. As noted, the game was becoming much more action oriented, the HUD changed again, and the turn-based combat officially evolved into action combat with face button controls. It really feels like some major internal meetings happened in January that led to these massive changes, like the design overhaul of a city, the purpose of abilities, and the complete shift in genre. The developer even noted if they didn't keep a record like this, some parts would possibly look completely different by next week, which is insane. February 13 added a stamina meter.
I don't even know what to say. I mean, obviously I knew it was going to happen. I've played the final game, but it's just so disappointing to see how much progress they made on that and how good it looked. 2 years, 3 years before it came out, and how much that was just ripped out of the game. Because look at these have watermarks on them. These are stock textures. Ugh.
Using pretty much the exact same asset from
This is
Zelda as a
exhausting.
placeholder. By the 14th, the game had essentially become a full-on FPS. It's really unfortunate watching the original ideas tear apart and the project spiral into this, but it definitely makes me appreciate the final product all the more. Like, it's a cool idea, but this just does not look that great. Maybe with some polish and some aim assist, it could work, but it is incredibly rough here. I'm just so glad Game Freak got away from this eventually. Imagine how awful the developers felt at the time, knowing their initial ambitious plans, and watching the whole project crumble and morph into this within weeks. It's genuinely sad. That being said, they did their best to deal with the situation, and tried to make the most.
Yeah, and it seems like... Yeah, he's right. It seems like whatever meeting they had in January, like, completely overhauled what they were doing and basically said, hey, I want whoever the developers were answering to basically said, cut the textures, cut the quality of the overworld for some reason. I genuinely cannot imagine what that reason was. Cause like 3 years before the game is coming out, they're not thinking of like optimization at this point. They haven't even figured out what the game is gonna be, so they're not thinking of doing optimization. I genuinely can't even begin to think of what would have caused that decision. And it's such a stupid thing. It's Windows. It's building textures. But it, like, looking at how the game looked with these details in, it would have made a huge difference. It would have made a really big difference. And the fact that they did it and they had it and it was there and someone told them to take it out 3 years before they should have been thinking about optimization. It boggles my mind. And upsets me. It upsets me. It actually makes me upset.
Most of their environment. While the backdrop wasn't great, you could still feel the passion come through in the smaller details, like the market stalls. By February 16, Lucario's walking and running animations were finally added to the game. Keep in mind, they still had to animate hundreds of Pokemon, as well as figure out their newly revised gameplay quirks. On the 21st, they were able to add reflective walls to one of the first buildings you see.
And it was removed in the final game!
A new mechanic that lets you switch between FPS abilities using the Y button was also
That's
added,
insane.
as demonstrated right here. I guess this idea wasn't terrible. It made the most of a riveting FPS idea, but especially since it brought back the Talonflame Tornado Jump. The developers seemed passively critical of the state of the game as well, ending the month's issue with,
I was a bit concerned that having 4 options might make it difficult to quickly select one, depending on the situation. But I think that for now, you can just quickly press the Y button to switch so you don't have to use your brain as much.
Seemed passively critical of the state of the game as well, ending the month's issue with, "I don't really want to use my brain that much." A perfect reflection of the shoddy mechanics we saw earlier. There was also a small jab at the release schedule, mentioning how the game
While we're talking about this, Ikaku will probably be unveiled next year. You may find it hard to believe, but it's true. It was unveiled. No, it was unveiled this year. 2023. Wasn't it? No, wait, no, sorry. It's about to be 2026. No, yeah, no, it was 2024. Yeah. But still, when 2024? Let me check. Why am I doing this on my phone? I can just... I only have 4 days until then. Yeah, weird, huh? Pokopia, right, that's something I have to talk about because I'm not happy about that either. Is it gonna be in playlists or something? Pokopia, Pokemon Horizons, the series full episodes. I need to catch up on that. I really like that show. Legends EA. An extended look. Is this like the original one, or is this like the trailer? No, this is the reveal. Okay, it was exactly 1 year. It was exactly 1 year, almost to the day after this document, which is fascinating.
would probably be unveiled next year, and how you might find it hard to believe, but it was true. Leading into March, more small presentation tweaks were made. On March 3rd, the placement of Pokemon in the city was updated. This specific video focused on Pokemon spawns in back alleys, specifically Wild Patrat and Wild Pikachu would be showcased, which made me realize, aside from parks we saw earlier, there hadn't really been a mention of wild zones yet, and wild Pokemon had just been shown roaming freely throughout the city. In the final game, they were mainly restricted to designated wild zones, with very few wild Pokemon found outside of them. The next video was about
and when they were found, and this is something that's been in my head since before this. Dog, where is your seawater comments? What happened? They don't really move around that much in the final game. You find them in their place, and they move maybe like a couple feet from where their spawn is. So to see like a group of Patrat actually like running through the alleys just on their own, it's kind of interesting.
Version of capture chance, a term describing the chance to catch a Pokemon after you knock it out. We saw an early prototype of this much earlier, but now Game Freak had finally acknowledged it as an official mechanic. The early Pokeball switching UI was pretty interesting too. However, the developer tried to catch Venusaur and it escaped. Thankfully, March 8 marked the first step back in the right direction. At first glance it looked identical to previous builds, but this was when Game Freak began slowly pulling away from the FPS style mechanics, disengaging the player and the Pokemon's movement, so they no longer stuck together. Strafe movement was no longer forced either. We were so back. March 10 probably had the best breakdown of a
I
wild
don't.
Pokemon situation
Okay,
at this
I do think the Pokemon being locked to the trainer. I don't think it should have been forced, but I think it should have been an option because, like, when I'm roaming around the city, I don't want my guys lagging behind me. And depending on the Pokemon, they sometimes just regular walking speed leaves them in the dust. Like, I want to be running around with my guys. I don't want to be running around and my dude is like 20 feet away from me and getting farther, and then he just teleports next to me. I can see why it would be a problem in battles, but just make it so that in battles that doesn't happen. And in the overworld, you can like toggle it. I don't know. I would have liked it.
this point, Pokemon would obviously live in Lumio City. In addition to the Pokemon that live with trainers, there would also be many wild Pokemon. Still no concrete mention of a wild zone. It kind of seems like they'd just be scattered all over the place, and you'd have these investigation pop-ups to discover Pokemon, assuming for a short period. I would assume rarer Pokemon would rotate on a temporary basis, while larger areas like the plazas or the parks would house a variety of common Pokemon. I like the idea, but the final game definitely ended up more convenient. By the 13th, the Dizzy effect had been added to Capture Chance Pokemon, which was a great addition. Also noticed the UI had been tweaked again. Then we got our first glimpse of Night in Legends EA. Night looked solid overall, nothing too crazy to note. The talk prompt had also been updated, along with a new message window. I love the green theme in particular, it just looks fantastic, and I honestly wish they kept it. March 16 emphasized how the camera work had evolved from Legends Arceus. Aiming was now snappier and simpler, lining up with our camera discussion from earlier. It's nice to pinpoint the exact moment this change was made. And March 20 brought more hope, pushing the game even further away from the FPS direction and closer resembling the final game. However, it seemed that Patrat now had a singing ability, this being described as an investigation task. This could be a very early prototype of Emma's quests, but at this point it seems that each Pokemon would just have a task after being registered in the Pokedex. This footage also gave another
Did he mean
example
Mabel?
of a random wild area integrated directly into the
Did
city,
he mean Mabel?
not so much a dedicated zone. Now seeing it like this kind of convinces me on this iteration of wild zones. I like how the Pokemon aren't blocking the path or overpopulating the area. They fit the environment and are placed in the right spots. The Pokedex mechanics were now properly implemented too. On the 24th, the developer writing the document mentioned returning to their parents' house.
Actually, I'm back at my parents' house due to various circumstances. So this time it's just a casual chat. As long as I have a laptop, I can work even at my parents' house. If I can do it in Paris, I can do it in Okazaki City, Aichi Prefecture. Thanks for doxing yourself. I can work in my own room where I lived until I graduated from university. When I started elementary school, the desk I got had a huge illustration of Super Mario World on it. My parents told me, you might be embarrassed about this when you grow up. But I remember thinking, that won't happen. I was completely right. That's so fair. Even now, it's a great illustration. Also, while I was working, I felt someone staring at me from the front. Who is this guy? Who is writing these? I want to meet him. Who is this?
And shared a small bit of personal lore, as well as showing their old study desk.
Oh, wait. I need to analyze this.
Bit of personal lore, as well.
Okay, so this is just sick. This is just a Kumodo? Is that his name? That looks like it's cutting something off. I need to know who this is. This is a dope desk. I'm just saying, like, what Pokemon are there here? Oh, this dude loved Poliwhirl, which is so fair. Poliwhirl is, he loved Poliwhirl. Oh my god. There's like 4 Poliwhirl cards here. And then, what? 1, 2, 3 Poliwhirl figures, a Poliwag, and then these 3 little Poliwhirl statues, and then a Poliwag statue. And Mr. Saturn. What else we got here? We got Lopunny. That's crazy. Duskull, Mawile, Haunter, Mischievous. I can't tell what that is. Pikachu, Chimchar. He had a Super Mario World. I'm trying to dox this guy. Oh, and another Poliwhirl thing here and here. Dude, this guy loved Poliwhirl. Okay. If he was a little kid for Super Mario World, and this was his room until he left university, and this only goes up to Gen 4, right? When was, hold on, who is this? I don't know who that is. Okay. So, this guy is child when Super Mario World comes out. Super Mario World specific year was 1990. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, 2006. So there's 16 years in between then. Of Japanese graduation. Age of Japanese. From age 7 to age 12 in elementary school, 13 to 15 in junior high school, 16 to 18 in high school, and 19 to 22 in university. So let's say he was 22 when he graduates university. He would be 6 when he got this desk illustration, which checks out. So if he's 22 in 2006, because this absolutely seems like the kind of guy that would still be getting these things at age 22. It's 20 years later. This guy is 42. I think I have my math right. If he's 22 in 2006, $16 years before. I have my math on that right? No, minus 16. Then he's 6 years old in 1990. '22, 2006. Yeah. So this guy's in his mid 40s right now. I did not have to do any of that. Um,
Well as showing their old study desk. Anyway, back to development. The game had finally zoomed out the camera, and it no longer
uh,
looked like a shoddy FPS. They actually saved the game. You could now mega evolve Lucario outside of Battle 2. Within a month, the atmosphere went from losing all hope to slowly building back up and taking the right steps. The game just looked so much better than it had a few weeks earlier, and that makes me so happy to see.
which is still
I
way
really
worse than
like
it
this
did
screenshot. It
a
gives
week
us
before
an idea
that.
of how you would find rare Pokemon, with Pangoro being tucked away in a small space behind some ivy. I would have loved if the final game expanded on this, maybe building out creative environmental puzzles to access rare spawn locations. Finally, the month ended with the latest multiplayer footage. The auto-lock system introduced earlier massively improved the entire game, stripping away a huge portion of the awkward FPS gameplay. The combat was still spammy and unbalanced, and switching moves was inconvenient, but it was still a huge improvement and a step closer to figuring it out. Though I feel like this video shows the best case scenario for the FPS mechanic. It's not overbearing and a lot less chaotic, with a bit of strategic positioning going on too. Auto-lock definitely improved it by a lot. April kicked off with work on the story version of Mega Royale. Here we have an image of placeholder Team MZ. Mega Royale had now
This is
actually
crazy to
divided
see.
into two separate projects. One was Communication Mega Royale, a 4v4 team-based mode that had undergone development since the alpha prototype. For the longest, this was the Mega Royale concept. And Story Mega Royale was a new concept, an event-style battle where you fight different groups and battle a boss at the end. These bosses would separate chapters.
That's completely
similar
different.
to gyms in previous games. Story Mega
Oh, no, it's
Royale
not.
ended up being the one
Kind
that
of.
closely
Kinda is.
resembles the final ZA Royale product. Communication Mega Royale somewhat remained, though it was changed up quite a bit and evolved into more of a free-for-all. It's emphasized that progression would unlock special moves to let you explore more of a city. Meanwhile, lighting and general
So that was
rendering
still
have
a
been
thing by this
steadily
point.
improving.
The special overworld moves were still a thing by this point.
Overall, it just looked a lot better than before, despite the massive downgrade. Even basic animations like deploying and retracting Pokemon had been refined for polish. Game Freak even mentioned that overall detail was getting better and better, and honestly the screenshots look great, as long as you don't look around too much. Still, at least they were trying. The dev also pointed out how an NPC in X and Y would teach you all about Street Pass. For some reason this got the dev excited, but no further explanation was given.
Dude, I am obsessed with whoever this mysterious developer is. Apparently in X and Y, there's someone at the store who can teach you all about Street Pass and other things. I see, so that's why I'm so excited. What? What are you talking about? This guy's insane. This like 45-year-old man just going around like, I fucking love Street Pass. I fucking love Street Pass. Tell me about Street Pass.
For some reason this got the dev excited, but no further
And that doesn't
explanation was
explain
given.
any further.
Early beta testing was well underway by the 14th.
During the early stages of the beta test, you will receive your 3 starting Pokemon. You may have been excited about, should I get Pokabu or maybe Waninoko? But unfortunately, you'll end up with Chikorita. Chikorita slander. Chikorita slander transcends culture. Oh my god. The thing is, I don't even need. I was gonna be like, oh wait, who are these Pokemon talking about? Because I don't know their Japanese names. But fucking, unfortunately, you'll end up with Chikorita. I picked Chikorita, man. I picked her. That was my choice. Chikorita slander transcends culture.
But as stated, during the starter selection segment, you would unfortunately end up with Chikorita either way. This is a pretty nice shot. We can see that Lumiose had a solid foundation by now. On the 20th, developers
He did that to be
edited-
funny, too. I know he did that to be funny. If this guy grew up in the 90s, he was growing up with Pokemon Gold. This dude knows. This dude knows the Chikorita slander culture. So he absolutely was like, "What if we just made it so they have to get Chikorita? What if we don't give them a choice? What if we don't give our developers a choice? What if they have to have Chikorita? What if that's funny?" And
Huge
he's right.
world in
It
the
is funny.
overworld. The earliest version of a sprawling item boards in the final game. There were very big boards here though, apparently because they didn't stand out or have any effects yet. By this stage most of Lumios's layout was locked in, said to hardly be updated anymore. Instead they focused on adding details and placing Pokemon in different spots to test the atmosphere. The 26th brought in the train model, complete with a very detailed interior.
Dog, why does the train have more details than the buildings?
And as of the 27th,
It's
still
literally
no
in one
dedicated wild
cutscene.
zones, though Valsprout could be spotted hiding in a small patch of grass, continuing that earlier concept where wild Pokemon would just roam the city. The month ended with a demo called Bustle in front of a station, where they tested the ideal density of NPCs and Pokemon. It looks pretty lively. And yes, the Hilda model was still present in the game. By May, the battle system had properly evolved into a real-time action format. Moves were now mapped to ABXY, and each one triggered a cooldown meter. This is basically identical to the combat in the final release. Despite this, the game still had an FPS-like icon visible, and movement continued to have a slight shooter feel outside of battle, though it's not a big deal. May 31st then brought back the overworld abilities, like this Alakazam teleporting you to inaccessible areas. Sadly, this never made it into the finished game.
Yeah, I know. I'm upset about that. I want that.
After a long time, we finally got to see rooftop gameplay again, which showed the new iterations of rooftop traversal that would sort of make it into the final game.
Did we get a... That's a zip line. We got the Rotom phone, which I don't like.
Talonflame's Tornado Jump had also evolved into a Tornado Glide, which was another cut mechanic. Then, nothing. Over the next few months, record keeping would halt, no magazine issues for June or July, and documentation would resume in August. A new writer had taken over June or July, and
It's been 3 months since Ikaku last updated this month.
documentation would resume in August. A
new writer? No! By the way, responsibility for the text has shifted from blank to blank. Therefore, the quality of the reading material is likely to decline. Yeah, it's likely to decline because my goat is no longer the writer. Is this blurred out strictly for the video or like... All the way to August 2024, the month the Terra Leak breach occurred. Okay, so all of this was in the Terra Leak? Hold on. Whoa. Multiplayer Splatoon-like game. So that apparently got turned into ZA. Pocopia. Legends 3 Galar. Legends 2 Ho-Oh and Lugia. This. Mega Turtle? I don't know. Action Link is also revealed. Game is not set in the past, which kind of sucks. Mabel from Team Flare is part of the Quasar organization. That ended up not being true. Complete removal of rideable Pokemon. Battle system. Where do I find these documents, though? Pokemon Wind Wave Generation 10. Fucking, of course we're doing Generation 10. Which is called Gaia. Legends 3 Galar, which is crazy that we're doing Galar next. Multi-region remake. Also planned for 2028 or later, suggesting it was positioned as a major release rather than a short-term filler title. Pocopia, which we know about. Champions, which we know about. What? I'm going to look at this after I finish the video, because what the hell is this? Yeah. Jeez.
Writer had taken over as well, joking that the quality of a magazine would now decline.
Where do I find this
besides
shit?
the difficulties, the gameplay and graphics were said to have improved quite a bit. Erido was apparently fired in favor of Big Boots, which was clearly the ZA protagonist model. Wide Pikachu was gone too. Interiors now looked pretty much identical to the final game. Again, they spared no compromises here. Definitely the best looking parts of the game.
Okay, that's Tawny. I think. Yeah, that's
City
Tawny.
itself looked extremely close to the finished product. Textures and all, outside of obvious missing events and NPCs, I couldn't note any changes to these locations in the final game.
Okay.
The game just looked a lot better in general, much to the credit of the lighting and skybox in my opinion. The 7th was literally dedicated to fixing lighting, and honestly it showed. The game looks pretty good to me here.
Yeah, this does look
The
better.
Nimona
I
NPC
still
was
like
apparently a
Nimona.
Master Ball shop, even though Master Balls weren't being considered to be included in the final game. Meanwhile, the actual Pokemon had
There
been
is one,
absorbed
isn't
into
there?
the Pokemon Center. On the 22nd, the first batch of production-ready Pokemon shaders had been provided. These were likely designed by Creatures Inc., and they would give a polish you would expect from a final game product. We've never really had insight into this part of development, so that's pretty cool. As seen for the rest of the month, not all Pokemon had received their production-ready shaders yet.
I can't tell
Even
if they
more
were
visual
using
tweaks.
if they were using Scarlet and Violet shaders up to now, or if Scarlet and Violet shaders looked like unfinished production shaders. That is so
Even more
upsetting.
visual tweaks had been made by the 25th, overall just showing more polish. Then by the end of the month, the August Milestone ROM had been created, which actually got its own dedicated issue. Unlike previous prototypes that were all built in Unity, this August ROM was compiled in the Switch engine. Apparently this ROM lets you play through chapters 1 and 2 of a story, sort of. Very bare bones early events had been placed into the game. At least it seems you could finally pick a starter. Every Pokemon encountered in these chapters was a Pikachu. Even chasing what was supposed to be a Pancham led to a battle with Pikachu. You could send out Pokemon with the up button and lock on with ZL, using moves with A, B and XY. As noted, this was a big change in direction from the March ROM. Lucario's Solar Beam was apparently the hottest move at the time. It seems the instant auto lock outside of battle was removed, meaning catching Pokemon suddenly became really difficult, though you could enable auto lock with a ZL button. There were no messages for chapter progression, meaning you never really knew when the build would officially progress or end. And Mega Royale had finally evolved into the ZA Royale concept we know today, initiating at night. To no surprise, you would complete this mission by defeating all of the Pikachu. The trainer rank and point system were implemented as well. I really like this menu design. It's clear they had a retro aesthetic inspired by the Legends title, but then made it a sleek modern design. The bench mechanic was added too, and we got a really nice screenshot of the sunset.
I'm trying to figure out what that text all is. It's just watermarks.
September 1st then listed out a number of problems the team had with the August ROM, as seen right here. This
hold on. Let me read that. Although the ROM burning was successful in August, it was also a month in which we identified some issues. The development environment isn't in place to produce event quality, right? Can techniques be attractive? The HUD is hard to see. The roads are boring. Is this really okay for wild Pokemon? The map lacks extravagance.
Problems the team had with the August ROM, as seen right here. This cutscene was also added that same day. On September 4th, 2 separate AZ models were introduced, possibly to look at different angles of a model, both behind the counter and out in the open. There was also mention of polishing the nightlife vibe of Lumio City, though it's a little hard to tell what exactly they meant by that. We know that model production had progressed throughout the month.
I kind of understand what they mean by that, because to see how it feels exploring the city at night, which I get because I love exploring it specifically at night. Like, I would do different story quests during different times of the day in game. Like, I would never fight the rogue mega evolutions during the day. I would only do it at night. I think in part that's due to the fact that, like, I mean, this whole idea of like testing how the game feels at night is because the ZA Royale is at night. So there being in the day-night cycle is incredibly important. Nighttime needs to kind of feel like the city is asleep. Everything is, the parents have gone to bed. It's time to go buck wild in the battle zones. I think that worked. I think they did a good job with that, considering I would consciously try to be doing certain things at night for the vibes. So yeah, I mean, I would say they achieved their goal with that. But would have been better with the buildings. Would have been better with the buildings that were fully modeled. I'm never gonna let that go. I'm never gonna let that go. Like, it was one thing when I was just like, oh, the game doesn't have fully modeled windows. That was one thing. Now that I've seen that they did have fully modeled windows and I've seen the game with them, I can't unsee it. If it was just the Switch version, I would have been okay with that, because I have the Switch version. So if I was playing it and like, okay, the Switch version has the lower quality, that makes sense. But the Switch 2 version has the fully modeled window. But it doesn't. The Switch 2 version looks the same. I don't know, man.
Tower was complete. Just imagine how much more stunning this scene would be if the buildings had 3D textures.
See?
The challenge cards were added to ZA Royale 2. More importantly, this gave us our first official
There's yellow
mention of
ones
battle
now.
zones. Pikachu's model was also
Or
shown up
that's
close,
probably...
clearly still not
He's not
finished
wide
yet.
anymore. He's
And
not
then,
wide anymore.
October 12th brought us our first look at a wild zone. After months, it seems they had finally figured out how they were going to distribute wild Pokemon. As described, wild zones would contain lots of Pokemon, and you could battle and capture Pokemon only within the zone. Apparently, since behavior hadn't been coded in, every wild Pokemon approached you in a friendly manner. In contrast, the battle zone borders were added too. This here is really interesting, since we get to see the level design of Lumio City without the wild zone design. The road from Hotel Z to the lab was even nicknamed Route 1 internally. Layout was still subject to change. Roof models were being finalized around this time too. A variety of events were being added as well, alongside broader event connection work. This is the moment where Rampage Mega Evolution battles were mentioned for the first time. In general, much of the level design was pretty much complete by now.
And so this is approaching the reveal. This is 4 months-ish out from the reveal, 4 or 5 months.
Here is morning, noon, evening, and night. Pokemon icon UI continued to be tweaked, but almost finalized. Towards the end of the month October ROM, the team began stuffing the build with smaller features, crouching was re-added to the game, and ladders were implemented to allow rooftop traversal. Event arrangements were starting to take shape, and the goal for October ROM was to connect the events of chapters 1 and 2 in particular, with a quality of about 30 points, whatever that means. November was very short. All we really got was
That's
a
probably
look at
some
a rogue
internal
mega
thing.
sequence for Venusaur, strangely featuring Ivysaur in the scene instead. Alongside that came
Huh?
a cutscene.
Wait, what?
November was very short. All we quality of about 30 points.
Sorry, did they use Bulbasaur? If I'm understanding correctly.
Whatever that means. November was very short. All we really got was a look at a rogue mega sequence for Venusaur, strangely featuring Ivysaur in the scene instead.
They did. That's exactly what they did. They used Bulbasaur and had it Mega Evolve into Ivysaur, when they had Pokemon already coded into the game with Mega Evolutions. That's just interesting to me.
Alongside that came a cutscene for Professor Mabel, and that was basically it. In December, the
Arigato
Holidays
gozaimasu,
received a
arigato-sama.
massive visual overhaul. They now looked far closer to their final in-game appearance, now actually having entrances to these zones. The tutorial capture sequence demo was added as well, featuring Bunnelby. Honestly, I'm more surprised at how close the visuals were to the final game, despite being 2 years out from release. Here we can see a very refined UI layout, almost identical to the final game, with slight changes. However, the main menu still kept its retro aesthetic. By the looks of things, a lot more Pokemon had received their production ready shaders as well. And right at the end of the month, the Rust Syndicate building was modelled, though still missing a lot of the final detail. The December ROM was apparently packed with new features, now that the game was actually becoming an RPG. From here, the goal was to continue refining the specifications, improving the quality, and making adjustments, followed up with a very interesting quote. I think we've reached a phase where the more we do, the better the quality will be. Based on how similar the game already looked to the final version, visually it's not exactly a promising statement. January's issue contained just one image, and one of the strangest comments in the timeline. The next 6 months will be the climax for Ikaku. So let me get it straight. In January of 2024, Game Freak planned to finish Legends EA development by June, and the final game would end up releasing in Q4 of the next year. This could be linked to the internal delay, but we'll get more into this later. After recording this, a user named SomeoneIDK approached me with new information. Apparently the game was internally delayed on January 29 in order to focus on quality. The game specifications were also being
IK Mastering has been pushed back 2 months to the end of November, so November 2024. After that, Super compatibility will be implemented. Nintendo Switch 2. Both Switch and Super will be released simultaneously. So they were developing this solely for the Switch up to this point. ROM 4 will be created. ROM 3 will be created. ROM 4 is planned to be rescheduled. project is scheduled to be completed by the end of February, so February 2025. So it will need to be delayed to include it. Online battles will be included. It's unclear whether there will be DLC, because various software will be released shortly after. Battles may be played at 30 FPS and 60 FPS. Even though the 2-month delay is for sound and debugging, the current schedule will not change. Okay. Very interesting stuff. The mastered build is the retailed complete build. Mastered was targeted for November 2024. Game was likely targeted for early to mid 2025, then was delayed so Switch 2 version could release simultaneously. Since the Switch 2 ended up releasing in June, plus undocumented reasons, that could mean the game was delayed 4 to 5 times plus in total.
And it was noted that development would likely require additional debugging time. Later that same day, Game Freak reportedly received a message from Nintendo stating that Super would release.
Okay. Mastering completion date postponed. Super release date for March 2025. I don't know if this is correct. I don't think it was March 2025. I'm pretty sure that's when the Switch 2 was like fully revealed. Like we got that huge Switch 2 presentation. I'm pretty sure that was March 2025. Titan's Super version. So Scarlet and Violet Switch 2 version will be released here at 60 FPS and compatible with Switch. What? What do you mean compatible with Switch? Were they planning to update Scarlet and Violet to work better on base Switch as well? That would have been nice, but that's stupid.
In March 2025. Anyways, the lone image for January showed Bagon standing in front of Quasartico, included simply because 2024 was the year of a dragon. By February, most of the game's major events and cutscenes were in place, alongside the construction scaffolding that appeared throughout the city. Once again, the surprising part is how nearly final the game already looked, so far off from release. If you've seen my videos, you'll know that this is extremely unusual for Game Freak. Even if they don't diverge much from a core plan, it's unlike them to have such a solid foundation this early on. Here's a walking demo, intended to show NPC spawn behavior. Besides the comment about the bugs needing to be fixed, the main focus here was the surprisingly long NPC render distance. This key scene at the Rust Syndicate was also created, and here was the title screen at the time. April's issue was basically just a
the fact that they had so much progress done a year out and delayed to, at this point more than a year after. And the game still turned out the way it did. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Reflection and breakdown of the March ROM. The character select still used placeholder faces from SV, but character customization was already implemented. The menu screen finally received its revamped modern look, basically the same one seen in the final game. Interestingly, it kinda feels like the save menu still carried remnants of the earlier retro aesthetic. We also got our first clear look at the protagonist's in-game model. According to the comments, the protagonist came to Lumio City on an overseas model aesthetic. We also got our first clear look at the protagonist's in-game model.
It seems that it's now okay to post images with blacked out content. So they were editing the images to black out the characters. Okay. I
According
didn't
to the
know that that's what
comments,
that was.
the protagonist came to Lumio City.
The protagonist of this work, in other words, you, when you come to Lumio City on a trip overseas, a rival calls out to you. Is that
On an
really what
overseas
happens
trip.
in the game? It's a trip?
The UI was now identical to the final version. It was mentioned that subquests would be added after
When
the
are
main
you
story
going
content was
home?
complete, though it's unclear whether this meant before or after the planned June deadline. On April 8th, the message board graphics were added, definitely some of the nicest visual touches in the game. Then the bonus card graphics were added just 2 days later, functioning exactly as they do in the final game. Here is Wild Zone 6, and for reference here is the final game. Alongside that came a flood of new shots from around the city, Seeing all of this reminded me of just how many interiors were actually in the game. It's probably a higher number than you may imagine, and it's especially impressive how stunning each of these interiors were. You can have your criticisms about the exterior, but it cannot be disputed that they put immense detail into the interiors, and it shows when you remove all the NPCs and events. No offense to Pokemon, it really doesn't feel like you're looking at a Pokemon game.
Okay, we got the new Quasartico logo.
By the end of the month, the introduction scene had been finalized. And over a year and a half out from release, large sections of the game looked practically finished. Even the coffee mechanics were in place, though lacking a few assets and custom animations. Photo mode was complete too.
Oy.
Then at the end of the month, the long-awaited Rotom Glide was finally added. I noticed that in the past few months there was less documentation of the overworld abilities, so it's kind of sad to see such a key feature early on quietly disappear in favor of a Rotom Glide. Either way, the glide worked exactly the same as it does in the finished game.
Yeah, I don't like how
June opened
much
with a headline titled "Stories from the Past."
I really don't like how much the Rotom phone is appearing in the games. I don't like that it's replaced the Pokédex at all. And now it's also being used for like overworld traversal. I just don't like it at all.
Reflecting on mysteries from X and Y, and teasing that some of these secrets might be explored in Legends EA. A screenshot highlighted the Lysander scene in the old Team Flare base, though here he was simply referred to as F for some reason. By the 10th,
Probably for
the
flair.
giant grand platform used in the climax was complete, a sign that we were reaching the end of development.
They were
Around
still
this
using
time, we also see the scene
those
where Ivor
placeholders.
punches through the gate. This is also our first time seeing Emma in any of the monthly issues. Clearly she had been added quietly sometime earlier, but unfortunately her introduction wasn't documented. And the ZA Royale app photo was implemented on the 26th. By the 28th, work had officially begun on the game's side missions. There would eventually be around 120 of these. As we've seen with other games, Game Freak tends to work on their one cherry on top mechanic towards the end of development, so at least for Legends
God, I'm
EA,
exhausted.
it seems the side quests were the cherry on top. Which definitely makes sense. It feels like they gave their last bit of passion into that feature. It's said that the debugging was set to begin in July. That leads us to the final entry of the entire magazine, the July 2024 issue. It opened with one last message from the developer. There is little time left, so let's raise the quality with wisdom, courage, love, effort, ingenuity, and perseverance. On July 2nd, post-game content was added.
Okay, so we've passed reveal
The Rotom Glide was now
a while
matched to
ago.
the A
I
button.
didn't notice.
Previously it was the Y button. Apparently this NPC was deliberately positioned to be the first character most people would talk to. Dialogue for the train platform was complete too.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, this is the game. Everything else is just like
By the end
minor
of the month,
changes.
15 cafes had finalized with complete mechanics. And the final magazine entry ended with an image of Yveltal at the cafe. This would be our last update of the Legends EA monthly magazine.
At the end of this month, July is over. The final fitting and polishing is ongoing. Compared to 6 ROM, it's not that it's packed with new features, but rather that the finer details are finally starting to come together as expected. I'm always worried about continuing to work until August, but then the Oban holidays come in between. So thank you for your hard work this month. I wonder how many more Ikaku updates I can make this month.
Because in the middle of August, the Terra Leak breach occurred. An unprecedented leak salvaging over a terabyte of Pokemon development history, an event that would allow fans like you to experience videos just like this one. According to internal notes, Legends EA reached a feature-complete ROM in June 2024. From that point forward, only refinements and small additions remained. However, the game still had more than a year before release, leading to more questions than answers as to what really happened. A few playable builds did actually leak, and here's everything you need to know about them. So there were 5 playable builds in Terra League 2. June 27, June 30, July 29, August 2nd, and August 8. Since the game was feature complete in June, all of these builds were obviously feature complete. And yes, there were PC builds. The person behind the Terra Leak reportedly played at least one of these themselves, which is almost certainly how news of Mega Evolutions leaked months before their official reveal. So imagine if all of this came out during the first wave of the Terra Leak, a year before the game would release. It would have caused absolute mayhem. It truly would have destroyed the game's rollout. So at least you have to give props to Game Freak Out for not ruining this game for everyone. During the first wave of the Terra Leak, Game Freak Out announced that they wouldn't publish any Legends EA content until after the game launched. Aside from leaking the list of Mega Evolutions, they kept their promise, holding back all major information for a full year until around the game's release. All I know about the June 27 build is that it lines up with a final milestone tag on record, strongly suggesting that this was the exact day the game officially became feature complete. The following day was also when work on side quests had begun. The June 30 build is one I have the least information on, but realistically with it being only 3 days after June 20.
So there was no reason to remove the build. I'm still stuck on that. They had more than a year. They had more than a year of dev time. They could have just thrown in the buildings. They had no reason to leave it like this. It's really upsetting.
I can't imagine much changed. Where things get more concrete is the July 29 build, which was documented extensively by the bomb. As clear from the footage, the game was essentially complete. From the opening sequence to the final moments, the entire game was playable start to finish, over a year before its official release. It even looked identical to the final game. Surprisingly, a decent amount of localization had already started as well, using machine translation as a base before real translators would step in. But as complete as the visuals looked, many areas like Hotel Z still lacked final music.
Okay, it's using Scarlet and Violet.
I'll link these videos in the comments if you want to see them in great length for yourself. The August 2nd build is also sparsely documented. Again, being only a few days after July 29, it's unlikely anything major changed. And finally we get to the August 8 build, the final known build, and the last piece of Legends EA content before the Terra Leak breach. This build was experienced by MD Travis, and I'll be adapting his observations here. So yes, this was a PC build, and here's the title screen. Surprisingly, the debug menu actually included a 60 FPS option. 1080p was the max resolution for the game. Despite the game being technically complete, there were still quite a few rough edges and placeholders. Some of you might recognize this placeholder sound effect. In general, the game was full of bugs at this point. MD Travis mentioned that the fletchling he caught got stuck behind the wild zone gate. And in the first battle with Tawny, both she and her Pokemon fell through the map, forcing you to use debug shenanigans to keep the game progressing. Besides the direct translation, some text was straight up just
Tawny just
unlocalized
fucking
too.
died.
Here's a scene with Freecam early on in the game. We never really got a close-up of Lumio's tower, so this is pretty interesting. And here is a scene
That does
featuring
make
Out of
sense. You're
Bounds.
never supposed to see it. Oh,
The
that
game
just
would
happens
also
to me in the
crash a
final
lot,
game.
like very frequently,
I have videos of that happening to me in the final game.
and the Mega Crystals would respawn instantly. Though Spupa seemed to have some trouble breaking the Mega Crystal.
He got
MD
it
Travis
eventually.
had to
He
use
got
the
it
debug
eventually.
menu quite a few times just to progress the story. In fact, he noted that the one time he actually had to cheat was to defeat Rogue Mega Absol. Since the game would just crash mid-battle, he had to apply an instant KO to his Pokemon just to bypass this bug. Emma seemed to be using Juliana as a placeholder name. It appears some manual translation had
Why?
been done, though still using placeholders.
She had a
at
name.
times. And the Dedenne gods were called MT Dang. And finally, the August 8 Chronicles would end with MD Travis finally getting his Alpha Scolipede. And I quote, "I've gotten all I wanted in this game anyway." It's important to state for the record that the public cannot play the PC builds of Legends EA. It is practically impossible, even for me, and even if someone somehow did obtain a working copy, it would be a very buggy, unstable version of the game that's borderline unplayable, so there's really no reason in playing it. Given everything we know, Legends EA appears to have gone through a full year of debugging, optimization and refinement, the longest dedicated polish period for any Pokemon game to date. Whether that was influenced by the Scarlet and Violet backlash,
And
or
it
if it's
still
down
turned
to
out like
mysterious
this.
delay, it's hard to say. Now that I think about it, maybe the reason TPC deliberately scaled back the visuals was to avoid repeating SV's launch issues. Most players can tolerate subpar graphics, but poor performance is just completely inexcusable.
But you had a year! A year! To get that working. Create a final build with the subpar graphics and then start implementing the good graphics. And if you can't get them working in time, release the final build with the worst graphics. Maybe that's what they did. We don't know because we don't get anything after August 2024, but there are no notes suggesting that that's the case. Because that would have been a plan from beforehand anyway. The fact that they never even mentioned trying to do that at this point is upsetting. Like, they had no reason to not be doing that for a full year.
This launch was a mess, and TPC wanted to avoid repeating it at any cost. At least that's my theory for the downgrade. I'm just glad the final game runs so well, even on Switch 1, and sure, it absolutely could have looked better on Switch 2, but if you're always chasing hypotheticals and what
January of 2023, right?
appeared an engine. Of course, the final models looked
No.
adjustments had been made, pushing it closer to traditional Pokemon battles. I wasn't particularly.
When was it?
Welcome back. Today I will be walking you through every single build of Pokemon Legends EA. And seek elements. Kind of like Splatoon, it's a bit confusing. would probably hit multiple opponents at once. Mega UI updates. We reached January monthly issue of if only these.
Okay, so it was January 26th that that note came from. And Scarlet and Violet was December of 2022. So it absolutely, yeah, that's what it is. That's absolutely what it is. Even though Scarlet and Violet itself doesn't look that great, I can absolutely see Game Freak just being like, fuck the graphics, focus on performance. And the game does run great, so yeah, that's probably what it was. This was just a month after Scarlet and Violet's release. Yeah. Oh geez. That's so unfortunate because they had the time. They had the time to work them in and get it running properly. And then they knew the Switch 2 was coming, so they had the power. All right. So, okay. Anybody in Twitch chat right now, make yourself known. If you are here. Literally type anything, cuz then that's how Twitch tells me if there's someone in the stream. You don't count as a viewer if you haven't chatted for a while, and I just want to know because I want to know if I can raid someone. There's no one to raid anyway. All right. Well, that was a stream. I'm tired. I'm very tired. I don't think I'm doing Danganronpa today. I don't think I have a 4-hour stream in me. But this has been fun. This was a fun thing to watch. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna go take a nap. I'm gonna go take a nap. Everybody have a nice night. Where's the screen? Okay, goodbye.